I'll be back in a minute.
Would you like me to press it for you?
No, I have that.
Okay.
So thanks to the translation team, you will get some, potentially you will get some Thai. Anyway, we'll try. So first of all, does anyone know what is Google App Engine? So okay, I'm going to make an introduction of Google App Engine. I am assuming that you know what is web development a bit, and you know some Python a bit. So Google App Engine has been launched about 6 months ago by Google, and it's basically Python hosting on Google machine. As it say here, which doesn't work, basically anything that can run as a CGI can run on Google App Engine. By default, they give you a SDK to install on your own PC. Let's see. So what you do is that you can do all your development on your own PC, everything, and once you're happy with it, you just put one command and it goes live on the Google Web Server, Google App Engine. So basically, currently they're in beta. That means there is a certain number of limitations. The first limitation is you can only have 10 applications. And one of the limitations is that, whoops, sorry, we'll get there. One of the limitations is that you cannot delete applications. So if you do test 10 times, you have your full quota. So one thing you can do is you can replace application with one another. The only thing you cannot change is for each application you have a keyword which happened in the URL. So if you pick a stupid keyword in the beginning like test, you will end up having test application forever. Another thing which you have a certain number of limitation is that they limit you on the bandwidth you can use, they limit you on the CPU you can use, and they limit you on the disk space you can use. When the Google App Engine will be out of beta, you will actually be able to pay and increase your quota. You have other limitation, and this one you won't be able to change it. For one, it has to be Python for now. They're talking about having other languages, but for now it's Python. And the Python running there is what's called pure Python, meaning that you cannot have any module which is in C. If you have a module in C, you want to have it run, it won't run. You have to have pure Python module. Also, you cannot write as a file system. You can only read. You cannot use socket, but there is an API to get pages. And you cannot fork and have subprocess and thread. So first, I'm going to try to show you a simple application. You need basically 4 files. This one, actually, you technically don't have to do it. This is a file that tells the Google Application Engine which query you run and which indices you want. The SDK build it for you. When you run your local test, it will see that you use this query a lot and will say, we need an indices, and we'll put it here. So by default, there is one which is generated. You can tune it manually if you want, but if you don't care, you just let it go. These other 3, you need them. Actually, this one is a template. If you want to program like old time, you don't do template, you put everything in there. This is not good practice. You should do template for your web application. So the first file, it's called app.yaml. YAML is a format to do some kind of structure with space. It's good enough. So basically, this is a simple thing. Here, you put the application, and this is what it will be called on the Google App Engine. So pick the correct name here. If not, you won't be able to change it, or you waste one of your 10 slots. This is a versioning. You can upload 200 versions if you want, and on your Google App Engine, you can say, I want to run version 3, and it will basically, you can switch back and forth between versions. Runtime Python, it's fixed, and this is fixed too. This part is the handler. Basically, it tells you for which URL, which Python you want to run. So here you can have regular expression. You can basically root a little bit. And this one is where everything happened. In case you develop and you want to use form, this is a restricted URL. You cannot use form here. So don't use form. If not, something funny will happen and you never understand where is your bug. The same way underscore AH is also restricted. Oh, sorry. Nope. Nope. Yeah. Wow. Anyways, this is Python code. As you can see, the presentation didn't work that well. It's a bit compressed. I won't have time to change it, so don't worry. Anyway, the basic thing is most of it is copy and paste. Where things happen is here, where you basically do something, put it in the value in the template, and then display the template. In this case, our application do nothing. They just print hello world with a date, so don't worry. But what I'm saying is the main, well, you can't see. Anyway, usually you copy and paste this one and you start mucking around. Nope. Yeah. The template is based on the Django templating engine. So if you know Django templating, you'll learn it. You know it already. And if you don't know, it's quite easy to learn. Like I was saying in the previous slide, I forgot to tell you, Django, the whole framework, also run on Google App Engine. They just don't run the current version, which is #1. They run the previous version. They will update it eventually. I don't know. Usually at the next. Basically, you can put your own version already. The main difference is when Google provided it, doesn't count in your disk space. So it's a trade-off. Eventually, they will upgrade it, I guess, once they put everything on. Because when they released it, that was the latest version. So I'm assuming they have no interest in keeping an old version around. So basically, on your local machine, you can run the app server. And bear with me. Let's try it. Here, this is the app server running. Basically, you have a local web server all in Python. You don't need anything but a web browser to look at it. And you can develop and you can test locally. You get nice error message. You get a stack trace when you have error message. It's in English, though. Once you're happy with everything, the same way with a command line, you type this little thing which say, take this application and send it to Google App Engine, and that's it. It's running. I don't think my Wi-Fi is working. If not, you have this crappy application running. Anyway, it doesn't do anything. In case you want to try it, it's here. There's a .com at the end. AppSpot is a free hosting offered by Google for Google App Engine. If you're willing to pay, you can have your nice URL too. So now I'm going to quickly browse over the API offered by Google App Engine. The first thing they offer you is authentication. They manage everything for you. They do. They provide the Google login, and they check if your page is, if the user is authenticated already and everything. The drawback is you can only use Google authentication. If you want to use your own authentication, you have to do it yourself. There is a possibility to use OpenID. But right now there's a bug and it doesn't really work. They're aware of it. The issue, if you want to track it, is 404. Yeah, it's a funny name. When you get the authentication, what you get back is a nickname and a Gmail address. So people were saying that if your user change email address, basically you have a different Google account. From your point of view, you have no way to figure it out that someone has changed email address. So that might be a problem in your application, depending how you want to see it. OK, sorry, I forgot to do the tie again. Oh. So the next application API is something called fetch. It's basically a way to grab a web page. You can do HTTP or HTTPS. It can only do port 80 for HTTP and port 443 for HTTPS. So if you want to grab any other port, you cannot. big thing, it's synchronous, meaning it will block until the other page answer. If your other page takes forever to answer, you will have a timeout. And Google App Engine, one of the restrictions is that your request must run in a certain time, and if not, you get an error message. So that might be one problem. The good thing is Google does the get for you, so you have a chance to get a nice bandwidth. The next API is memcache, which is basically in-memory cache. The way you do is you have a key, you had a content, you cache it. You can decide that it never expire in a 1 second, 1 month. So you can manage your memory in cache to make things faster if you want. You also have an image API, which basically you can do a certain number of resizing, cropping, cutting, changing the color. It supports all these formats. The main thing, like I told you before, you cannot write to the file system, meaning that if you do some image processing, you have to store it in the database or find another way to store it. You can also send an email. You're limited to 2 emails a day. Again, when this is out of beta, I'm assuming you will be able to pay for more. I haven't tested how they protect against spam or anything. I'm sure they do it properly. The email is asynchronous, meaning that you say send an email and then it returns, and in the background the email is being sent. So you have no problem with blocking or anything. Okay. So the next one is a big one. It's a data store. Yeah. So basically, the main difference between Google App Engine and any other way of developing web application is that this is not a SQL database. This is not a relational database. So if you're syncing in relation way, it won't work on Google App Engine. The advantage of the data store, at least that's what Google says, is that it will scale massively. So if you do a small web application, which you know it's only going to be 10 users, maybe there's no point into trying to fit your old model into the new model. On the other hand, if you try to do something big, that might be a good way to use a data store. So basically, this is, when you learn Google App Engine, this is the main things that you have to learn, is that it works really differently from a standard application database. So for one, you don't have SQL. You have something called GQL, will look like SQL, or you directly have an API to do relationship. So the first limitation is that you cannot query across relation, meaning if you have 2 tables, you cannot do join or anything like that. The second thing is that you can only get 1,000 records at a time. There's a way to do offset, but basically you cannot do a select all and get you 1 million records. It won't work. You have to manually do the 1,000 move back and forth. The third thing, which I haven't tested that because I was just running it locally, so I can't tell, but they say that it's the write is much slower than in the SQL databases. There's no triggers, there's no views, there's no constraint. Again, this is not a relational databases. Transaction can only be done around entity which are in the same hierarchy. So I'll explain later what a hierarchy means. But basically, that means that you cannot do a transaction across the whole database. You have to arrange your data in a certain way so you can do only transaction in this way. There is no database function available. That means you don't have max, you don't have sum, you don't have a certain number of things. So for example, if you want to count the number of records in a table, you have to manually maintain the counter yourself. There is no way you can do a select, sum, or whatever. So again, like I was saying, this is different from a relational database. You have to sync in a different way. There is a lot of, basically the basic problem with moving from a relational database to the Google App Engine. A lot of people have been experimenting with it, and you'll find articles on the web explaining how to move your old model to the new model. But if you start from scratch again, you have to change your way of thinking. Still not? I'll be back. You cannot make relational. You have to do it in a different way. Basically, this, you might actually be able to read it. This not. The way you define thing is, for one, there's no, in SQL you will define your table and everything. In here you define your model in Python. So you can list property and you can say which kind of property it is. So in this case, this one is a string, this one is the one thing you can have is you can have list. So you can define a property as being a list of something else. So you can do some kind of relation this way. The way it works is that you define your model, then you create a new object, then you populate it, and then you put. Okay. And in each, which is not defined here, you have a unique identifier called the key. Once it's been saved to the database, your key will be populated automatically. You can manage your own key, or you can let Google manage your own key. Your call. And I have 5 minutes, so I'm going to hit my damn computer. So what I was saying is, put will create or update a record. Get will get it back. You can get on the key, or you can search on certain property. Delete is to delete, obviously. Like I was telling you, you have a GQL, which is SQL-like, or you have a query interface. It's lazy, meaning if you do a query and you don't get you don't access the thing, it won't do the query. You just wait until you access it. You can fetch, meaning you will get everything, or you can iterate, meaning you will have to do a loop over it. Another thing is you can have dynamic entities, meaning that you can define something and then add property dynamically. So here you can't read it, but basically, let's say you define a person with first name, last name. Okay, you will create a new person here, and you decide that you want to add color of the shirt as a property. You just add it and you save it. For that particular record, it will have the property. For the other, it won't be there. So again, you have some kind of flexibility being that. This is, you can do a lot of interesting things with these dynamic properties. So that's why I was telling you about the transaction. When you create object, you can tell this entity as a parent. If you create a parent, you end up having a group, and only on the group you can do a transaction. So again, you have to decide if you want to do transaction. If you don't want to do transaction, Google suggests don't bother with doing groups, parent and everything. Okay, I'm going to conclude here since it doesn't work. Why you might want to use Google App Engine. For one, if you think you're going to have a huge application, it will scale. For two, if you want to sell it to Google, that's a good way. For three, if you want to learn how to work with a data store, basically if you look at all the Facebook, Amazon and everything, they end up having a similar kind of data storage. I mean, it's not a real database, it's more data store oriented or other things. So that's one way to practice. Reason you don't want to use it. For one, if you want to sell to Microsoft or things like that, that might not be the good platform. For two, if your application is really limited, like I was saying, you only have 10 people, there is no point bothering do that. Just do your simple application. That's about it. If you have some more questions, please, I will try to put that somewhere in a more readable way. I'm sorry I messed up.